Sam Rodriguez, a 34-year-old software developer and father of 8-year-old twins Emma and Diego, thought his biggest challenge was managing the family's mounting medical bills after his wife Maria's unexpected surgery 6 months earlier. Then Eugene Blackwood knocked on their door at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening, demanding that Sam's newly installed Tesla charging station be removed within 48 hours for violating neighborhood electrical standards. What unfolded over the next 4 months would test everything Sam believed about environmental responsibility, community fairness, and finding the courage to expose powerful hypocrites. Before this story begins, consider, how well do you really know what your neighbors are hiding behind their perfectly manicured facades? This happened just 8 months ago in Riverside Meadows, a middle-class subdivision outside Phoenix, Arizona. The Rodriguez family still lives there today, and their story sparked changes that rippled through dozens of similar communities across the Southwest. Sam had spent 3 careful months researching his Tesla purchase, calculating every financial detail down to the penny. With Maria's physical therapy appointments, requiring daily trips across town, and gas prices climbing toward $4 per gallon, the electric vehicle represented both environmental consciousness and desperate financial necessity. The Level 2 charging station installation had followed every regulation meticulously. City permits secured, electrical inspection passed, proper distance from property lines maintained, even the charging cable organized with an aesthetically pleasing retractor system to maintain the neighborhood's pristine appearance. The Rodriguez family had moved to Riverside Meadows 3 years earlier, drawn by the excellent schools and the promise of a stable community for raising their twins. Sam's background in software development meant steady income but also long hours debugging code for a healthcare technology company, work that felt meaningful but left little energy for neighborhood politics. Maria taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school, a job she loved but that barely covered the family's healthcare premiums. Their life was carefully budgeted, with every major purchase planned months in advance, which made the Tesla both a practical necessity and a significant financial commitment. Eugene Blackwood had ruled Riverside Meadows HOA with an iron fist for 7 consecutive years, his leadership style shaped by 3 decades managing drilling operations for Continental Petroleum. His retirement had left him restless and searching for purpose, which he found in maintaining what he called community standards and traditional values. At 58, Eugene possessed the commanding presence of someone accustomed to absolute authority, combined with the particular bitterness of a man watching his industry become increasingly vilified by younger generations who didn't understand the real world. The evening confrontation on Sam's doorstep carried undertones that extended far beyond simple rule enforcement. Eugene's criticism of the charging station centered on excessive electrical draw and industrial equipment in a residential setting, but his language revealed deeper resentments about California transplants bringing their liberal agenda and virtue signaling at the expense of property values. Sam found himself bewildered by the hostility directed toward what seemed like a reasonable accommodation for modern transportation needs. Eugene's demands seemed to carry the full weight of HOA authority behind them, supported by references to electrical load restrictions buried deep in the community covenants. He produced a folder containing power consumption data allegedly showing that electric vehicle charging represented an unfair burden on the neighborhood's electrical infrastructure. The technical language and official-looking documentation created an intimidating impression of legitimate regulatory authority. Even though Sam's engineering background suggested something felt fundamentally wrong about the calculations, the 48-hour deadline created immediate stress for the Rodriguez family, transforming their home from sanctuary into source of anxiety. Sam spent sleepless nights researching HOA law and electrical codes, discovering that Eugene's interpretation of the rules stretched far beyond any reasonable reading of the actual regulations. The charging station drew less power than many common household appliances, and its installation had been professionally completed with all required permits and inspections. Yet Eugene's position as HOA president lent apparent legitimacy to demands that seemed increasingly unreasonable under closer examination. Maria found herself caught between supporting her husband's environmental values and worrying about potential conflict with their neighbors. The twins began asking why Daddy seemed so stressed all the time, and why the car charging thing was causing so many grown-up arguments. The family's carefully maintained financial stability felt threatened by potential legal costs or forced modifications to their new vehicle setup, expenses they simply couldn't absorb while still managing medical debt. As the initial deadline passed, Eugene escalated his campaign through increasingly formal channels. Official HOA violation notices began arriving with mounting fine schedules, threatening liens against the property if the charging station remained. The language grew more aggressive with each notice, citing willful disregard for community standards and persistent violation of electrical usage restrictions. Sam discovered that challenging these fines required appearing before the HOA board, a body Eugene had carefully stacked with allies who shared his skepticism toward environmental initiatives. The mounting pressure forced Sam into deeper research, where his software developer's instincts for systematic investigation began revealing inconsistencies in Eugene's claims. The electrical load calculations contained mathematical errors that no professional engineer would make, and the cited regulations seemed to reference codes that didn't actually exist in their community's governing documents. Most puzzling was Eugene's selective enforcement. Other neighbors used hot tubs, workshop equipment, and elaborate outdoor lighting systems that drew substantially more power than Sam's modest Level 2 charger. 3 weeks into the conflict, Sam's evening walk through the neighborhood took on investigative purpose as he began documenting the actual electrical usage patterns around Riverside Meadows. What he discovered shattered any remaining belief in Eugene's good faith enforcement of electrical restrictions. House after house featured equipment that drew far more power than his Tesla charger, from swimming pool heaters running constantly to workshop setups with industrial-grade tools to elaborate outdoor entertainment systems with multiple high-wattage components. The most shocking discovery came accidentally when Sam's tennis ball, thrown by Diego during backyard play, rolled through a gap in Eugene's fence. Retrieving the ball provided a clear view of Eugene's backyard setup, an elaborate hot tub installation featuring not just the main unit, but also a separate heater, multiple pumps, underwater lighting, a sound system, and even a small refrigeration unit for beverages. The electrical panel feeding this equipment was clearly oversized and appeared to have been installed without the permits and inspections that Eugene demanded from others. This moment of discovery crystallized Sam's understanding of the true nature of their conflict. Eugene's harassment had nothing to do with electrical load management or community standards, and everything to do with personal opposition to electric vehicles and the environmental values they represented. The selective enforcement revealed a deeper pattern of abuse of authority, using HOA power to advance personal prejudices while exempting himself from the very standards he imposed on others. Armed with this knowledge, Sam began building his case with the methodical approach he brought to software debugging. Digital photographs documented the various electrical installations throughout the neighborhood, with power draw calculations based on manufacturer specifications and usage patterns. Public records requests revealed which properties had obtained proper permits for their electrical modifications, exposing a pattern of violations that Eugene had systematically ignored while targeting Sam's fully compliant installation. The research phase also connected Sam with Maria Gonzalez, an electrical contractor who had worked on several neighborhood installations and possessed intimate knowledge of local code requirements. Maria's professional assessment confirmed Sam's suspicions. Eugene's hot tub installation violated multiple electrical codes and likely exceeded the community's actual electrical load restrictions by a factor of 3 compared to the Tesla charger. More importantly, she revealed that Eugene had personally blocked her recommendations for neighborhood electrical upgrades that would have easily accommodated multiple electric vehicles. Word of Sam's research began spreading through informal neighborhood networks, reaching other residents who had experienced Eugene's selective enforcement in different contexts. The Patel family had been harassed over solar panel installations that supposedly violated aesthetic standards, while the Johnson family faced restrictions on their home workshop that somehow didn't apply to Eugene's own extensive garage setup. A pattern of authoritarian control began emerging that extended far beyond Sam's specific situation. These discoveries coincided with Sam's growing awareness of the broader environmental implications of Eugene's opposition to electric vehicles. Research revealed Eugene's professional background in petroleum extraction and his ongoing financial interests in traditional energy companies. His resistance to EV infrastructure wasn't just personal prejudice, but represented a calculated effort to preserve economic models that climate science had rendered obsolete. The conflict had evolved from a simple HOA dispute into a microcosm of larger struggles over environmental responsibility and energy equity. The stress of prolonged conflict was taking its toll on the Rodriguez family's daily life. Sam found himself distracted during work meetings, his code review suffering. As his mind wrestled with HOA regulations and electrical specifications, Maria began experiencing the physical symptoms of chronic anxiety, her classroom teaching affected by sleepless nights spent worrying about potential legal costs and community ostracism. The twins picked up on their parents' stress, with Emma asking pointed questions about why some neighbors seemed angry about their car and Diego developing behavioral issues that his teacher attributed to family tension. Eugene's campaign intensified as he sensed Sam's growing resistance, adding new violations for improper documentation display when Sam posted the required permits in his garage window and industrial signage for the small placard identifying the charging station model and electrical specifications. The fines accumulated into thousands of dollars, with legal language threatening foreclosure proceedings if the violations weren't addressed within increasingly unrealistic timeframes. The turning point came during a neighborhood emergency when the Hendersons' elderly mother suffered a medical crisis requiring immediate ambulance transport. Sam's Tesla, with its fully charged battery and quiet operation, proved invaluable for following the ambulance to the hospital and providing transportation for family members during the overnight emergency. The contrast between Eugene's abstract complaints about electrical usage and the real-world benefits of electric vehicle ownership became impossible to ignore for neighbors who witnessed the situation firsthand. This medical emergency also revealed the broader implications of Eugene's infrastructure opposition. The fire department's report noted that better residential electrical capacity would improve emergency response capabilities, allowing for more robust backup power systems and communication equipment. Eugene's resistance to electrical upgrades wasn't just limiting environmental progress, but potentially compromising community safety during crisis situations. Sam's research had uncovered a legal avenue that Eugene apparently hadn't anticipated: state environmental protection. Laws that specifically prohibited HOA interference with reasonable electric vehicle accommodations. Arizona's recent legislation, passed as part of broader climate change initiatives, included provisions protecting homeowners' rights to install EV charging equipment and prohibited discriminatory enforcement of electrical restrictions. Eugene's selective targeting of the Tesla charger, while ignoring far larger electrical loads, constituted exactly the kind of discriminatory practice the law was designed to prevent. The legal landscape also included federal tax implications that worked in Sam's favor. The charging station installation qualified for substantial federal tax credits that were explicitly protected against HOA interference by recent IRS regulations. Eugene's demands that the equipment be removed could potentially constitute interference with federal tax policy, adding another layer of legal jeopardy to his already questionable enforcement practices. As Sam's case strengthened, he began connecting with environmental advocacy groups who had been monitoring HOA restrictions on sustainable technology. These organizations possessed extensive experience fighting exactly the kind of selective enforcement Eugene was practicing, and their involvement brought professional legal resources that the Rodriguez family couldn't have afforded independently. More importantly, they connected Sam's individual struggle with broader patterns of resistance to environmental progress in suburban communities across the Southwest. The environmental group's investigation revealed that Eugene had been collaborating with similar HOA leaders in other communities, sharing strategies for restricting electric vehicle infrastructure while maintaining legal deniability. Email communications obtained through public records requests showed explicit coordination to slow the adoption of environmental extremism through selective interpretation of existing HOA regulations. This broader conspiracy elevated Sam's individual case into a significant environmental justice issue with implications extending far beyond Riverside Meadows. Eugene's response to Sam's growing legal and community support revealed the desperation underlying his authoritarian approach. New violations appeared almost daily, targeting everything from the family's recycling bin placement to the children's chalk art on their own driveway. The harassment extended to Maria's position at the elementary school, where Eugene used his local political connections to question her fitness for teaching positions that involved environmental indoctrination of young students. This escalation proved to be Eugene's crucial mistake, as the targeting of Maria's professional reputation finally mobilized community members who had previously remained neutral in what they perceived as a private dispute. Teachers and parents who respected Maria's classroom dedication began questioning Eugene's motives and methods, discovering for themselves the pattern of selective enforcement and personal vindictiveness that characterized his leadership style. The crisis reached its peak during the October HOA board meeting, where Eugene had planned to formalize the charging station removal and impose maximum financial penalties on the Rodriguez family. Sam arrived armed with comprehensive documentation of Eugene's own violations, professional electrical assessments, legal research, and statements from environmental advocacy organizations. What he hadn't anticipated was the level of community support that had been quietly building throughout the months of conflict. Nearly 40 neighbors attended the meeting, many speaking for the first time about their own experiences with Eugene's selective enforcement and authoritarian behavior. The Patel family described years of harassment over their solar installation, while the Johnsons detailed similar restrictions on their home improvement projects that somehow never applied to Eugene's own extensive property modifications. Pattern after pattern emerged of rules that were enforced selectively based on Eugene's personal prejudices rather than any consistent community standards. The electrical contractor Maria Gonzalez presented her professional assessment of neighborhood electrical usage, demonstrating conclusively that Sam's charging station represented a minimal load compared to numerous other installations that Eugene had never questioned. Her analysis revealed that Eugene's own hot tub setup alone consumed more electricity in a month than Sam's Tesla charging consumed in 3 months of typical usage. The mathematical impossibility of Eugene's stated concerns became undeniable when presented with actual professional calculations. More damaging still was the revelation that Eugene had blocked multiple opportunities for neighborhood electrical infrastructure improvements that would have easily accommodated not just Sam's charger but dozens of similar installations. His opposition to progress wasn't based on legitimate capacity concerns but on ideological resistance to environmental technology, which he had been using his HOA position to advance at the expense of his neighbors' legitimate interests. The legal implications of Eugene's behavior became clear when the environmental advocacy attorneys presented their analysis of state and federal protections for electric vehicle installations. Eugene's selective enforcement constituted clear violations of recently enacted environmental protection laws, with potential penalties that included personal liability for discriminatory practices. His use of HOA authority to advance his personal political agenda had created legal exposure not just for himself but potentially for the entire community. The meeting's climax came when Sam presented photographs and documentation of Eugene's own electrical violations, including the unpermitted hot tub installation that violated multiple safety codes and exceeded electrical loads by factors far greater than anything Sam had installed. The visual evidence was undeniable, and Eugene's attempts to dismiss his own violations as grandfathered installations crumbled under examination of permit records and installation dates. Community sentiment had shifted decisively against Eugene's leadership, but the immediate question remained: how to resolve the crisis he had created through months of escalating harassment and legal threats. Sam's approach revealed the character growth that had occurred throughout the ordeal. Rather than seeking revenge or maximum penalties, he proposed a resolution focused on community healing and prevention of future discriminatory enforcement. The settlement required Eugene to withdraw all violations and fines against the Rodriguez family, while bringing his own electrical installations into compliance with the same codes he had demanded others follow. More significantly, it established clear guidelines for future electrical modifications that would be applied consistently across the community. With professional electrical assessments required for any capacity, concerns and transparent criteria for all enforcement decisions, Eugene's resignation from the HOA presidency became inevitable once the scope of his violations and discriminatory practices became public knowledge. His replacement by a board committed to consistent and fair enforcement represented a fundamental shift in community governance philosophy, from authoritarian control toward collaborative problem-solving and environmental responsibility. The resolution extended beyond immediate justice to address the broader issues that had enabled Eugene's abuse of authority. New HOA bylaws included protections for environmental technologies, requirements for professional assessments before electrical restrictions, and transparent appeals processes that prevented individual board members from wielding arbitrary power over their neighbors' legitimate home modifications. 6 months after the conflict's resolution, Riverside Meadows had become a model for environmental accommodation within HOA communities. 3 additional families had installed electric vehicle chargers. 2 more had added solar panels, and the community had collectively upgraded its electrical infrastructure to support sustainable technology adoption. The changes attracted positive attention from environmental groups and real estate professionals, actually increasing property values through enhanced sustainability credentials. Sam's personal growth throughout the ordeal was evident in his new role as an advocate for environmental justice in suburban communities. His experience had revealed both his own capacity for research and advocacy, and the broader patterns of resistance that environmental progress faces at the community level. His software development skills proved unexpectedly valuable in documenting and exposing the systematic discrimination that many HOA residents face when attempting to adopt sustainable technologies. The Rodriguez family's relationship with their community had been transformed through the conflict, creating deeper connections with neighbors who shared their environmental values and establishing Sam's reputation as someone willing to stand up for principled causes. Maria's teaching had been enriched by her ability to discuss real-world examples of environmental citizenship and the importance of standing up for evidence-based decision-making in community contexts. Most importantly, the twins Emma and Diego had witnessed their parents demonstrate that ordinary people can successfully challenge unfair authority when they combine careful research, community building, and persistent commitment to their values. The charging station that had caused so much conflict became a symbol of environmental responsibility and the importance of protecting technological progress from discriminatory interference. The broader implications of Sam's victory extended far beyond Riverside Meadows, as environmental advocacy organizations used his case as a model for challenging similar discrimination in communities across the Southwest and beyond. Legal precedents established through his case provided protection for thousands of families facing similar restrictions on sustainable technology, while the documentation methods he developed became standard tools for exposing selective enforcement and HOA overreach. Eugene's departure from community leadership created space for environmental education and collaborative approaches to sustainability challenges. The same community that had once been divided over electric vehicle charging became a showcase for how suburban neighborhoods can adapt to environmental necessities while maintaining the community characteristics that residents value. Property values increased, community relationships improved, and infrastructure investments positioned Riverside Meadows for future sustainable development. The story's resolution demonstrated that environmental progress and community harmony are not opposing forces, but complementary goals that require principled leadership and commitment to fair treatment for all residents. Sam's willingness to challenge discriminatory authority while seeking constructive solutions rather than revenge created positive changes that benefited the entire community and established precedents for similar communities facing parallel challenges. After hearing this story, you'll never look at an HOA violation notice the same way again, especially when environmental progress and personal prejudice intersect in suburban communities across America. If this situation unfolded in your neighborhood, would you find the courage to stand up like Sam Rodriguez did? Sometimes protecting what matters most requires us to discover strength we never knew we had, while building the kind of community where environmental responsibility and neighbor harmony can coexist. The real question isn't whether we'll face challenges to our values, but whether we'll respond with Sam's combination of careful research, community building,